we really got to look at each and every week
Yep.
is you really have to look at every pick in a draft. There's a process to that pick. And I just got done with my better than zero for this season. And I showed that you're not building a team from week one or pick one in a draft to pick 20. You're looking at different players who are really good values and you're kind of building around them. And I like to build around quarterback and tight end because I want as many advantages as possible. But each pick, when you're making it in the draft, you have to have a process in order to come up with the right player.
So I've got a bunch of data on my FFPC no badges leagues, the patterns. This is another continuation of my process, how I look at things, Dennis, because I know I've got my draft room open. I'm on the clock now, and I'm sure the people are getting cranky because it's a 6 hour, and we've been doing the podcast, and I'm in the draft room and nothing's happening. So I'm sure they're sizzling and I'm sure in the chat room I'm getting chewed, but I don't care because if I can piss them off, then they'll make funny picks and I can win that way. So again, you can either be smart in your picks or in a combination of they pick wrong, right? So what you don't want to do is pick mediocre or pick wrong and they're picking right. You want to be the other way. So anyway, Dennis, and I know we're going to come back to this pattern, but I just wanted to, before we went into the draft room, and you're going to help me pick my sixth pick here. This is information I gathered, and what you see is the position and the numbers above from 1 to 23 is the draft rounds, and it's the actual physical number using the ADP of the different positions picked. So round one, 8 wide receivers, 4 running backs. Next round, which is really interesting and different from best ball, it's 4, 4, and 4. Next round, it's 3, 2, and 7. So you start seeing some patterns, and then I've highlighted the higher levels versus the low. And then below, Dennis, is my color metric to where the first 12 of the different positions are drafted. So when I look at this yellow bar on the quarterback, that means the first 12 are gone by round 10. So right away, this gives me an indication that I probably should pick a quarterback before round 10. I know that seems, well, duh. Yeah, but do people know what is at round 9, 8? In other words, if they haven't done this, when do they know that kind of drop dead? And again, notice I hadn't decided, am I doing, early or late? I just want to kind of know where the bumpers are if I'm riding a bumper car, right? I don't want to be going somewhere. It's like, I wonder what happens now. I do not like that question in redraft. I wonder what happens now. I don't like that. I want to at least have a guidelines, reference class forecasting. I've done video lessons on that. I have to know from the top down, folks, what are the average patterns or what can I predict? It doesn't mean they won't, the top 12 quarterbacks won't be gone by round 8. This could be a different league. It could be round 12, but on average, it's round 10. And so right away, I know I need to incorporate that into my strategy, Dennis. RBs, the first 12 are gone by round 3. So if I want a top, again, I'm not picking, I'm just saying, if I want a top running back, that's when. Notice 4 to 7 is the next 12. And notice 8, 9, 10, 11, it gets short, only 2 rounds. So it's 6 and 6. So it's like RBs are kind of start out kind of slow down, and then by round 8 to 11, they've seriously picked up, and then at 12 on, they slowed back down. So there's this optimal time. People are grabbing third, fourth RBs round 8 to 11. There's going to be a lot of activity in your league, I'm predicting. So do I join in on that feeding frenzy, or do I look elsewhere? Again, I hadn't even gotten to round 8 to 11. It's like, I know that's coming. How do I deal with it? I don't like to guess. I don't like to think about runs. To me, that tells me there's going to be a jaunty number of RBs picked 8 to 11. So you could call that an RB run. WRs, oh, well, tight ends, the top 12 are by round 8. So again, if your data says you need a top 12 tight end to be competitive, I wouldn't wait to round 9 and wake up. I'd be like, oh, I guess I should have already known the clock was ticking. Again, maybe it lasts to round 10. Maybe it gets crazy and goes to round 6. I just don't want to be surprised. WRs, the thing that I've seen in these new badges didn't surprise the hell out of me is, look, from round 1 to 6, you could call that a feeding frenzy. That 6 WRs on average are going every round. Click, click. Half your league every round is grabbing for the first 6 rounds WRs. So how do you deal with that? Okay, everybody's jumping on board. So you need to be aware, and notice it slows down about the time the RBs pick up round 8 to 11. So people that are feeding frenzy are like, well, I better get another couple RBs. When does that? Round 8. So you could almost figure out where the potholes are in your journey. And again, do you go over them but know they're there, or how do you respond? You need to think, at least you're not. I just don't like to be surprised, because you get panicked, you get crazy, and you start just shooting from the hip and grabbing things. And oh, maybe that, somebody said this guy's a value. Let me grab them now because everybody's grabbing RBs, or everybody's doing this. I don't want to draft based on what the crowd is doing. So, Dennis, round 6 tells me that RBs are going slow, and WRs are still in fashion, and half that round is going to be WRs. So there's going to be a premium WRs. We're in WR3 types, so we're down to the top 36 are going to be gone by leaving round 6. So I need to look at how I've stacked to see, do I need to continue, my dogs are going nuts, in wide receivers, or do I need to jump in with an RB? Notice we're in a slow period for RB. Or do I need a tight end, a quarterback? So those are questions. Notice I hadn't answered those, folks, because I need to see what else is happening. But I'm just setting the table, Dennis. Am I going to eat steak or lobster? I don't know yet, but here's the table. Here's the silverware. Here's the lobster spork. Okay, they put this on. Maybe that's telling me that I should expect to eat lobster. I don't know, but I don't like to be surprised, right? So, Dennis, I'm just giving you and everybody, and I'm recording this, by the way, visually, so people can see you and I talking about this. So I'm gonna stop here, then we'll go into the draft round, Dennis. So what you think about this approach?
Yeah, this is the approach you need to look at in your leagues to really understand where players are going. That's number one. Number two is when I look at just the RB and the WR positions.
Yeah, you
Okay,
can.
I look at running backs and wide receivers, and I look at over the last 6 years combined, the number of running backs that I would really like to have on my roster, and when I say really like to have, those are guys with an MVP index over 75. That means they've been a valuable weekly player on the healthy weeks that they've started. The number over the last 6 years of running backs that hit that value or better was 21. The number of wide receivers that hit that mark or better was 24 and a half. So there's just marginally like 15% more wide receivers versus running backs that are in that elite top 21 at their position or top 24 at their position. And when I look at how fast the running backs top 24 are gone, they're gone by round 7. But for wide receivers, they're gone by round 4. If the number of players hitting an elite level or a satisfactory, a good weekly value level of 75 are gone at roughly, 21 versus 24 and a half is not a huge difference. But the top 20, so if I end up with the top 24 running backs, if my starters, my top 3 guys are all in the top 24, I'm going to be feasting. To do that, I've got until round 7. Now, that doesn't mean I won't hit on a guy later on, but I want to be in that top 24. And for wide receiver, I got to do it a lot quicker. So the strategy differences don't make any sense to me, because why would you take the 35th best wide receiver when you could maybe have a top 24 running back at that position in the draft? Plus, Professor, wide receivers, they hit more on these late pick guys. Think of the Puka Nakuas. Think of a lot of the rookies that break out. Well, we don't expect them to necessarily break out. Doesn't mean they're going to be a top 10 guy. Having top 10 guys is great, but having a roster where you got 3 running backs and 3 wide receivers that end up in the top 24 in weekly value, and it's not that hard to do, that gives you an advantage against the rest of the teams in your league. And the way things are being pushed back at running back is because of the growth of this 0 RB trend. And when it comes to 0 RB, if you are going up against 11 people that are also using the same strategy as you are, that strategy is no longer advantageous. And that's the thing that I don't think a lot of folks realize. When you go into a fantasy football draft, yes, you got to have a game plan. Okay. It's just like going into a battle in war. You have to have a game plan. I'm going to take my tanks. I'm going to attack here. I'm going to use my artillery. I'm going to do this. But if the opponent attacks you in a way that you weren't expecting, your game plan has to change on the fly. It's the same thing in fantasy football. In fantasy football, it's okay to have a game plan. You better have a game plan. You better not go into this draft blind. But if all of a sudden you were planning on taking a tight end in the 2nd round, and because of where you're drafting, all of the valuable tight ends are gone. Let's see, there's a run of 6 instead of 4 in that 2nd round. In your particular draft, you don't want to be the tail end of a run when there's better value at other positions. So don't blindly go in to a draft saying, I got to have my tight end by round 2. Yeah, if you can get your tight end value, your best value, a huge value, one of the 3 elite guys or 4 elite guys maybe this season in that second round, great. But if they're all gone, don't take the 5th best one because maybe his value is much lower. I see players doing this all the time. They'll take the 15th best wide receiver when the 5th or 6th best running back is still on the board. You want to get as many elite players as possible. I don't care about the positions. I'll figure that out as the draft goes on. First 3 or 4 rounds, I want elite at every position. And if you get to round 4 and there's 35 wide receivers gone, grabbing that 36th one in the 4th round is not a value. You got to be able to adapt to what's happening. An adaptive draft style will always be more successful in fantasy football.
This figure here, Dennis, again, and I've already posted this on our Science of Fantasy Football website. You guys can see the pattern that I'm looking at. The purple X is the top value, the top picked in each round. So you get a kind of an extreme, kind of the mountaintop view. So quarterbacks are round 5 and 19. So the first one and I guess the second or third, those are the peak levels here. Doesn't mean that there's not others picked elsewhere, but it just kind of tells me. Notice RBs are 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, and 11 by this strategy. Tight ends, round 2, Dennis, round 13. So there are people hitting the elite ones at round 2, and people, looks like they're starting to get their second tight end. That's peaking at round 13. Look at the WRs. People are just grabbing them left and right, and after about round 7, they're kind of laying back off. It's like, okay, I've foraged and hoarded all the acorns that I'm going to need, and now I can go cherry picking elsewhere. I'm telling you, that is pointing to this grab lots of WRs. And again, this could be the 0 RB concept. And then I'm going elsewhere and hunting. Okay, so that's the environment that I'm in. But again, we're not talking at the individual level, folks. I just like to know the roadmap and think about the hills, the valleys. And then I also included a ratio of the numbers picked, and it's RB/WR by round. Anything at 1 means it's equal. Anything below means it's heavily biased WR. Anything above 1 is heavily biased RB. And so you can now see these patterns, and it looks like round 1 is WR, then it equals out because people want an RB in there. Then round 3, they're turning back and grabbing a WR. Then they try to balance it out with an RB. Then they're grabbing their third WR right there. That's the pattern we are under, folks. And then they're really, especially those that have ground, say 4 or 3 WRs in the first 6, 7, they're having to grab lots of RBs round 9, 10, 11. So that's coming. So I'm predicting these feeding frenzies. And then late in the draft, you can kind of see where that changes. So I like to know this. This is my process. Dennis, I've never seen this anywhere. I don't know what other sites are doing. And I say this all the time in my video lesson. Folks, if you're paying money and they're not giving you the full meal, you know, it's kind of like Wendy's. You open up, where's the beef? Folks, if you're not being shown top down vision of what's going on, what are you paying for? Because there's 300 or 400 folks on Twitter are going to tell you who's the sleepers and the breakouts. And remember, every player that's playing is going to be either somebody's sleeper or bust or breakout or non-break, whatever. So it's like The Economist, right? The errors are pointing in every direction if you listen to enough people. And I don't know. I mean, we're giving it. Dr. Bush is delivering it on a platter for freaking free. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. And Dennis is giving you his better than zero. Like, let me just give you the farm. Here's the deed to my life. Take it, folks. And the editor gets so mad between me and Dennis just giving it away left and right. It's like Halloween, and it's Mardi Gras. Here's the beads and the balloons. Y'all just take it and beat us at our own game. We're just giving it away. And I do not use my own name in these leagues, folks, because I don't want people to wake up and try to figure out what I'm doing. So, Dennis, this is the strategy. So round 10, round 6, I'm going into, I believe. Round 6 is an equal draw of RBs and WR. So, equal. So that's kind of the environment we're in here. So let me stop this. Oh, what did you think about that
Yes,
process? You
I
like
love
that?
that. I absolutely love the process, and it's something that I do similarly in every league that I'm drafting. So if I'm in a fantasy football league and I'm in the middle of a draft, and I did this during the Scott Fish Bowl for the live draft,
Yeah.
I keep a tally sheet every round so I know how many of each position have already been drafted.
Yeah.
And I know what a typical draft looks like. So I can compare. Am I reading into it that these guys are heavier on one position versus the other versus normal? And it gives you an idea of how they're going. I also will chart the players that they're taking, not the individual players, but the position.
Mm-hmm.
So I will know, okay, team manager 5, who is picking one in front of me, he seems to be going heavy for the running backs early.
Yep.
Team 7 on the opposite side of me, she is going heavy wide receiver. So if I have got to wait for that next pick to come around, I know what the tendencies are of people a few picks in. So it's always important to know that data and to understand that data. The other position or the other strategy move that I like to make is based on my theory of roster build in
Yes.
fantasy football. And in one quarterback redraft leagues, and these are leagues that start the standard number of 2 at wide receiver, 2 at running back. 3 wide receiver starts, you have to go a little earlier on wide receivers to make sure you fill out your 3. But in a typical league where you start 1 quarterback, 1 tight end, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and 2 flex, which is what FPPC does, you look at that and you say, oh, I want to have balance between running back and wide receiver. And my attitude is no. Once I get 4 really good wide receivers on my roster, I am content because I'm starting no more than 4 of them any given week. Now I can fill out my roster with all upside guys because, and mostly running backs. My typical build in a league like this that we're looking at will be to be lighter on wide receiver than running back at the end of this draft. My quarterback and tight end strategy will differ considerably. It used to be, Professor, I was a 1 quarterback guy, even in 12 team leagues. When it came to my bye week or an injury, I'm going to the waiver wire. In recent years, I have not preferred that strategy anymore, but my basic game plan going into the draft, always subject to change. The earlier I grab my first quarterback, the later I'm probably going to take my second quarterback. And the later I take my first quarterback, the quicker I'm going to take my second quarterback. When it comes to tight end, if I grab one of the top 4 tight ends in the league, I'm done in that draft. I will deal with injuries down the road, but I'm probably done at tight end. Now, if a value guy like a Freiermuth falls around or 2 farther than I thought he should, or if that tight end at that position or in the draft, that draft position is a better value than anybody else, I will double up. If it's a tight end premium league and I can get a second tight end that catches a lot of passes, maybe I go and I invest in a second tight end, but that is rare. So having a game plan set in your mind, basic strategy, and then being able to know when to pivot off that strategy is very, very key. So let's look at your situation and
so
what you've
round
done.
6. Yeah, round 6, pick 10. I've got Pacheco, Lamb, Adams, Devonta Smith, and Kittle. I just picked up round 5. It was on that. Our metrics show Kittle is okay. He's not a value, but he's not anti-value. It's just kind of okay. I decided I wanted that and was going to pick up a value tight end way down the road. Probably if we look, I'm thinking like maybe Hawkinson, maybe, and I can look. So I'm just right out here. So I'm thinking the Joku is of interest, Goddard, Freiermuth, Hawkinson. I mean, I guess right now I see a lot of tight end 2 possibilities. Even I wouldn't be too upset with Cole Kmet, 120, way down the road, right? We're talking down the road 5 or 6 more rounds or 3 or 4 more rounds. So I don't feel any pressure to back up Kittle right now with another tight end. Quarterback, I don't have one yet. Really looking at Dak to stack with Lamb.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, or I'll take Jordan Love. I'm feeling the love between those two, and those are 100, 101. So right now we are in about the 58, 60. So about 50 more picks. So if we looked, Murray's going, Burrow 87. So we're way down 100, Dennis. I figured the round 9. I think I can wait and grab Love or Prescott round 9. That's kind of my thinking. I have 2 bites of the apple here now and then 703. So that's my quarterback tight end strategy. So that is an overview of those. And now then the question is, do I grab, an RB or a WR? So a lot of rounds, especially early on, is that debate. What am I taking? I think I've set with WRs. It seems like RB is what's calling to me here. And remember that people are still slow at about round 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We're going to see a renaissance of a lot of RB starting to go here. And the last, say 12 picks, Dennis, only 3, maybe 4 RBs have gone here. If you look over here to results, you can see people are still cherry picking. Remember, round 6 is that last forage for the third WRs, and hated to see Keenan Allen go. If he was still on the board, I would be intrigued to take him to stack, but he's gone. And so that's my debate in my head. And I'm looking, Godwin is of interest. Hollywood Brown, Jaden Reed, those are people I'm interested in. But I don't feel like I'm under just extreme pressure. To me, if you look at the RB, I don't know why Ramondre Stevenson is sitting there. Uh, Everybody's walked away, and Swift and those next three, I would be pleased to have any one of them. I like Stevenson and Swift a lot. Mostert, yeah, he's going to have time with A-Chain. So that seems to be what I'm thinking, Dennis, right now. And then we can talk about my pick or what you think I should do. So there's the setup. What say you on this?
Well, I think you're perfectly set up here at wide receiver. Of course, getting CeeDee Lamb, you paid up for him,
Well, third
but
pick.
if as long as he doesn't hold out, he's a great pick, and he's going to be.
I mean,
He,
how do we not? I mean, yeah, he could hold out, but I mean, I can't. It's all. I don't know what to do with that information.
no. So you got to ignore it because it's
Yes,
it's something that's out of your control.
yes.
And if you take a lump on it, you take a lump on it. But the number of times it's going to burn you is few and far between. He's he'll be there. He's going to play. It's not in his advantage contract wise not to play, and he'll probably be signed before long anyway. So you potentially have the top wide receiver in weekly value this
Yes.
season. He's a lock to be a top 3 guy in weekly value without a doubt. I love Isaiah Pacheco this year, and not just because I'm a Chiefs guy. In the past, if anything, I've had fewer Chiefs on my roster, especially at running back and wide receiver. Obviously, Mahomes and Kelsey are guys that I'll roster, but usually I'm out on the running backs and the wide receivers for Kansas City. But this year, and with the Kansas City defense getting better and better each year, I don't think they're going to be quite as top notch as they were last year. But there's nobody behind Pacheco. So you've got a potential top 5 running back in Pacheco there that you got in round 3. Devontae Adams has proven that I could throw him the ball and he'd still be valuable in fantasy football. So that's a solid pick. And I love Devontae Smith. I think the difference, the spread between Devontae Smith and AJ Brown could be much less this year. And Devontae Smith was already a huge weekly value for a guy that you're getting late in the 4th round. I also love the Kittle pick in my Better Than Zero article that'll be posted shortly. Kittle was the last of the tight ends that I'm willing to go into the season with without a backup. I would draft Kittle, and then depending on how things go, I'll either grab a value guy at tight end late. I love the Hawkinson Kittle combo idea.
And
I would,
again, worst case scenario, Dennis, is Cole Komet
oh,
and that,
absolutely.
yeah, that kind of thing. And
Or
the 12th, 13th round, just to cover me.
or even grabbing a guy like a Johnny Smith late,
Or Jelani Woods. I mean, I may even draft 3 tight ends this
I
year, since that is not, it's kind of on that borderline. Is it elite? Is it not? Sometimes, and it just depends. I don't know till I get down there, but around 16 or so, 15, I may take a third tight end just to kind of, okay, damn it, I'm going to stream in and out.
and that's not a bad strategy. Kittle's just on that bare bones of he should be really good. Okay. And in a tight end premium, he catches more passes
Yes, he
on a
does.
weekly basis sometimes than other tight ends.
He can limp through and get you, enough points that he's not going to lose you that, at least I'm hoping,
And,
right?
and here's the upside to Kittle too. If they do go ahead and trade Ayuk, all of a sudden Kittle could be an even more important part of that offense. Right now, he's the fourth best receiving option for that team
Uh-huh.
behind Debo, Ayuk, and CMC when they're all healthy and playing. But if Ayuk gets traded,
Yep.
I'm not excited about Ricky Pearsall or Jawan Jennings
Nope.
suddenly becoming a superstar when you got a guy like Kittle who has picked up the slack in the past. So whenever Ayuk or Samuel has missed a game, Kittle's value goes up. So I like that pick of Kittle. Fifth round is good value for Kittle. One interesting thing I will point out is that you right now are going to be at pick 70 in this draft. Okay. So you are pick number 70 in this draft. If my math is mathing, and I think it is, look at the quarterback value that is still on the board because you do have Lamar Jackson still available, who is usually gone
Yeah, he's at
around.
58. Yeah, I
He's
don't know why he's sitting there, actually.
usually gone by the fifth round. And in the fifth round, in my better than zero, I did not include him as being a value that I liked because with Lamar Jackson, you're going to get some spike weeks and you're going to be getting some bad weeks. Now, with our defensive metrics that you've been working on, Professor,
Yeah.
and with your understanding of Vegas odds and how that plays in
Hmm.
to the defensive matchups, I think we'll be able to diagnose the bad weeks for Lamar Jackson in advance. So suddenly, if you can go ahead and team a Lamar Jackson
Hmm.
with another quarterback later in the draft, maybe a Jared Goff, or maybe even take a gamble on Caleb Williams or a Kirk Cousins, even that you get much later in the draft. Now you got to look at Lamar Jackson and say he's slipped, and now he's more of a value, and he's not likely to be there the next time I pick. If you look at the wide receivers that are on the board right now, one of the top three wide receivers that you would possibly have, either Godwin, Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice, Jaden Reed, all those guys I would have pretty close to each other. I might have even included Hopkins in that group before the injury. Now, with the injury, we know that information. I would not draft him ahead of his ADP. There's also some wide receivers later rounds that have great upside that you could add as your fourth wide receiver. So I don't see wide receiver being a pick here at this round because one of those value guys will be there the next time you are up in round 7. So I get to the running back situation, and there's
We're,
two guys that shine.
Dennis, we're going to have a run pretty
Yes,
soon. It's coming.
yes,
And
yes.
so, if, for instance, if I were to beat that run, it would be taking an RB and another RB at 703.
And
And
this
then
is
coming to the quarterback round, maybe a wide receiver, and then finally a DAC. So I'll have this same configuration 8 and 9, and 9 should put me right like the 903 or whatever it will be down the road. Uh,
and,
so I'm anticipating DAC in the ninth round and maybe a WR, but I'm almost thinking two RBs right here. But I don't know what's going to happen in 6 picks, but
So here's where I think you can figure out what's going to happen in 6 picks to some level. Let's look at the rosters of the 2 teams between you and the next time you pick. So let's look at the late hitters roster and see what they've done.
Let's see. Can I pull that up? I don't know if will they let me do that?
You should be able to go into your roster down below where you got your guys, and you should be able to go in there and look at late hitters.
Yeah.
Okay. So late hitters has gone 2 running backs already, 2 wide receivers, and a tight end.
Balanced. Yeah.
He is going for Lamar Jackson or Lamar.
Yes.
Yeah, he'll go Lamar Jackson. So one of his 2 picks that he'll have between you and the next time you pick will be Lamar Jackson. I'll guarantee that. And the other pick might be a wide receiver. So I think he's not going to go running back. Let's look at who's that? Stansek.
Yeah.
And look at his team and see if we can see where he's gone.
He's like me.
So he's like you. He's gone heavy wide receiver. One of his next 2 picks will
be an
RB.
Back. Yep.
So the question that I have, let's go back to the RBs.
Yeah.
Who would you rather roster this year? Would it be Stevenson or would it be Swift? And that's the pick I would make. I would limit my pick to a running back here because with his next 2 picks, Stansek is probably going for at least 1 running back, and he might go 2. And that's
I don't have a problem with a bye week issue, so that's not an issue. My feeling is the range of outcomes for Swift is higher but lower, and Stevenson is going to be a more essential piece, but not the up or the down. In other words, I guess the safer pick seems to be Stevenson, but if I wanted to go for the broad outcome, it could be Swift. So I'm depending on what I'm thinking. I'm thinking Pacheco is safe. I mean, I could see Swift here, but it just feels like it feels like Stevenson is a sure thing, and I've already gambled with Kittle. I don't know. I'm debating my risk tolerance. Now we've moved. Notice, folks, we've moved down to my thinking. I know the RBs are coming. I know that I would love to have both. I'm greedy, Dennis. I want both. And you probably told me that I'm not going to get both. Mostert would be something I would look at 7-3. I'm not happy with Harris or Warren. Brooks, Pollard's a little early. In other words, if Mostert's gone as well, I could see myself doing Swift, Mostert, or Stevenson, Mostert. Obviously Swift, Stevenson. That's my preferred, but I bet you one of those is gone. I bet I have a shot at Stevenson, Mostert, or Swift, Mostert. Mostert has a bye 6, so there is that issue. My risk tolerance. So if that's what I'm doing, and I guess I could look at our. Let's go to my other data, folks. I can go down. See, Dennis, I'm going to pull secret stuff here. This is, so let me share this with the audience. So then I could ask the question about metrics. I'll pull up our data for round 6 here. Let's see, where's that at? Round 6, right here. So Stevenson is okay. He's not a bargain. I love Connor. I don't know if Connor I didn't see Connor. Is Connor coming up? I don't know where Connor's at. But Stevenson is here, and Swift. So both of them, if I'm looking at these two, Dennis, there's nothing really, our metrics really don't say much. 20th versus 23rd. So there's not a lot to distinguish there for us. I mean, I could look at your, just our overall. Vegas would say, would they say Swift? Vegas would say Swift. Vegas says 25th. Swift is 27th. So our metrics say the other way. So we're going, Stevenson seems to be, our metrics would point to him. Vegas says take Swift. So I'm not sure I'm getting a lot of information there. It's close, is what it tells me. So I guess it's close.
So
So
here's what I will say is that there are points in the draft that when you get it narrowed down like this, from a process standpoint, I don't think you can make a mistake on this pick. I think if the process has gotten us to Stevenson versus Swift, there's a slight chance that Swift could fall to your next pick. Maybe the other, you only have
that
two,
would be my optimal.
you
Yeah.
only have two players between you and the next time, two team managers to look at. One of them's going with a running back, but maybe they go Mostert. And the other guy we know is going to be a Lamar Jackson pick, and he probably needs a wide receiver. So I think you're going to be okay with only two running backs taken, one with your pick and then one other one taken. So your worst case is that you end up with Mostert and you gamble on him playing back to last year, close enough on touchdowns, or you pivot to a different position and you pick up a Brooks
Okay.
or a Chase Brown or
So,
a Brian Robinson later in the draft.
so Dennis, then the quarterback, what team's going to be more dynamic? Chicago or New England? And I could look at our DAPs. I could pull that data up. Folks, I've got the DAPs. I'd have to dig them. I don't want to do it right now, but just to let you know, I would be turning to that as well. Which one's
So,
more? I feel like Chicago is this higher ceiling than New England.
so here's an interesting situation when it comes to that is if you look at the matchups for the two players over the course of the entire season,
Yeah.
and you use that to factor into your decision.
Yeah.
First of all, Stevenson gets the edge on my weekly value tool, my
And
MVP
that's and
index.
our average of our 5 metrics says Stevens.
So Stevenson for the whole season has 5 easy or very easy games and 4 tough or very tough
So a
games.
balanced kind of scenario.
DeAndre
5-4.
Swift has 4 and 4.
So
So there's no big advantage there. But if you look at the Vegas metrics of toughness of schedule, meaning do they expect the Bears to be in these games? The Bears have about the 7th easiest schedule when you compare to last year's wins and losses. So Swift will get game scripted into more carries. However, you also have Roshan Johnson and Khalil Herbert right now on that roster. Stevens is an interesting case. Stevenson had his worst year last year due to injuries and Bill Belichick being Bill
whatever
Belichick.
he was doing. Yeah.
It was weird last year. With better coaching, better quarterback play, Stevenson's upside is certainly there. I also look at Stevenson as being several picks late in being taken. So I know he'll be gone. Maybe Swift or Mostert will still be there. And if they aren't, you have some other options another round later and can pivot or take somebody, because later on, you've got Brooks, you've got Pollard, you got Singletary, you got Brian Robinson, you got Chase Brown, you got Tyjae Spears.
And notice that's in that feeding frenzy coming.
Correct. And it will
That's coming. There's going to be a lot of those taken pretty quick.
They will go rapidly, but one of them will still be there in the 8th round. Yes. Most likely. So that gives you some options. I think Stevenson is who I would be leaning to. And you know how much I love Swift this year. But to get Stevenson and to possibly be able to get Swift to go with him would be the best coup, because I think your quarterback.
You convinced me.
Your quarterback strategy is sound, and I feel really good about that. So I think you're making the right decision.
Okay, that was good.
But again, Professor, I don't think you can make a wrong decision between Stevenson and Swift at that point in the draft. I think both are logical picks that will fill out the roster perfectly. I would love either one of those guys as my RB2. And now you've taken Stevenson, who would definitely be gone in the next 2 picks. Oh. And you may get back to Swift. If you get back to Swift, he's the automatic pick.
Yep. Okay, that was fun. So folks, I think you got an anatomy of our discussion. We gave you about 80% of it. And sometimes when Dennis and I have a quandary, we text back and forth. So if you want 100%, you need to find somebody who's better than you. Notice I didn't say the same. In some ways, Dennis, his patterns are better than me. So I lean on that. And so it's nice to have, like, phone an expert. If you remember Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, I want to be a millionaire, Dennis, in fantasy. So Dennis is my expert that I can text, between him fighting the backyard squirrels with his killer husky. I'll call him up, text him up. Okay, Dennis, and we'll talk through that. And by the way, after the expo, Dennis and I are going to jump into the Superflex tournament at FFPC. Not going to tell people what our name is. We'll come up with something, maybe a crawfish and a Boilermaker somewhere in the name. If you see a weird name like that that's trying to combine those two worlds, that's probably us. And so, Dennis, I think we are to one of our shows to talk about some picks there, because we've had 2 first round, successes, and we've broken even. I'm tired of not crushing those. So I want us to move to at least the second round, make some more money this year, leading to our eventual victory in the whole tournament. But right now, that's coming, folks.
And here's the thing, folks. And first of all, the professor is every bit as smart at fantasy football as I am. There's just some things I will see in the patterns that he won't see, but there's also some things in the data that the professor will notice that I might miss. And that's why I am quite often sending him a text when I get to certain points in a draft. And I did so during the Scott Fish Bowl, of saying, here are the guys I'm considering. What do you think?
Yep.
Getting a second opinion at key points in the draft is very, very important. And in my opinion, if I were to rate the importance of draft picks, first 3 rounds of a draft, you quite often can't make too many mistakes. Because if you pass on a player, you could take an equally great player. For instance, if you got to the point in the first round and you had every single, let's say the first 2 guys in front of you went running back, and with the 3rd pick in the draft, you could have the best wide receiver, and you made the decision to take either Tyreek Hill or CD Lamb, you can't miss. You can't miss. That's good process. Later on, as you're taking maybe the fifth best wide receiver in the first round, you still can't make a mistake between taking Amon-Ra St. Brown or AJ Brown. But when you get, so those first three rounds, you always have two players that are close enough in value that either one you take, you're looking good. By the time you get past those first 5 rounds, though, then it becomes more of a game of understanding the trends. First 5 rounds have established some trends among your league mates. Not as good as when you played in my home league. I've played against these people for 20 years now. Plus, I know it's a one quarterback league, but I know it's a one quarterback is going off the board in the first round league. 6 of them are going off in the second round league. So we draft as a group quarterbacks a lot heavier than any other league that I'll play in all season long. And every once in a while, Professor, I have to pound it into my brain, take a quarterback earlier than you would, or you're going to end up with scraps at the end.
We don't want scraps.
No, I want to have a top 10 quarterback in any league I play in. And sometimes you get forced to making a decision, or you then just wait and then you take 2 and rounds right after each other and take your chances more. But I like to have that little bit of certainty with an elite quarterback. And my elite list of quarterbacks that I would be feeling comfortable with if that was the only quarterback I got in the draft only extends to about 5 to 7 players this year. Gotcha. And after that, I want 2 guaranteed. But as I mentioned, I want 2 every league this year with the way my quarterback theory has been playing out. But the professor's knowledge of the data and being able to sift through the data and understand this stuff, that's what makes him a great player. And that's why I will utilize the professor in drafts as well. So find that person that is as good, if not better than you. And also, especially if their strengths complement a weakness of yours, then all of a sudden you're in really good shape when it comes to bigger money leagues.
So appreciate that, Dennis. This is up again, my pattern. One last thing, and then I will show you this data here, the secret data that Dennis hadn't seen yet. For the Mostert Swift discussion, Dennis, notice that round 7, there's still a slow RB picking. People are still, they're making the transition to the feed and frenzy. So I also knew that, and I was thinking, I'll probably get one of those 2 RB. We'll see. I doubt it'll move before the show's over, but anyway, that's another thing that I probably should have mentioned, that round 7 coming up, I've got a 703 pick. I'm thinking I'm still got this slow RB karma going for me to cherry pick, and then I should have a nice, setup to pick up Dak or Jordan Love. If it was best ball, I'd probably be greedy and take both of those. I did a doublet in a lot of my best balls this year, Dennis. My mid, you and I saw that phenomenon. People were doing that in best ball, and that would be, to me, those 2 would have been great. But anyway, I just wanted to let you know. So, folks, if you want to look at my data, I draft it. I break down round by round, and each circle is a draft pick by position. So you can start seeing the patterns if you want to look. And so if we look at 7-3, notice right there This is about the first one in, and then there's a gap, and then here's the feeding frenzy about midway seventh round. So, Dennis, I'm hoping I'm about 4 or 5 picks upstream, but look what happens here. Look how many RBs are going right here. Round 7, halfway, 8, 9, starting to slow at 10. And then look at 9, 10, 11, starting to slow. So, folks, you can visually look at, and I've got all this for you guys to look at as well. So you can just kind of mentally travel. It's like a roadmap. To me, this is my roadmap. Okay, that's there. And then this is the secret stuff that Dennis hadn't seen. Dennis, what this is by round, and this is overall not to position yet. I have something called no, yes, and even. No is it is a anti-value player. That means our metrics, average metrics. We're doing a beta test that we've talked about. I took all 5 of our weekly metrics that we've invented. Okay, nobody's ever done that. Why are you paying, folks, when we're giving it all for free? And so right now we don't know anything other than to take all 5 and just get a grand average. And next year we may throw out 2 or 3 of those. It may be MVP and the com data are the best too. Great, that we win. You see, we don't lose. We're not arguing. We're not trying to prop up something that's not working, folks. Unlike some of our Twitter yoo-hoos out there, they'll and what happens is about June they'll get bored and they'll start giving their big breakouts, and come August things have changed and they're kind of like stuck, and it's like, well, fantasy receipts, they'll flip me. Yeah, I said this, and I was for the player before I was against him, right? They talk about the politicians, flip flop. The fantasy yahoos will flip flop. They'll say something in May and June, and then they forgot about that, and they're saying something completely different. That way, they're covered. I told you he's a sleeper. They'll pull the June. I told you he was a bust. They'll pull the August. Folks, we're not playing that game. Okay, so no is a non-value. Yes is a value. Even is it's close enough to what we think in the public that we're not calling it one way or the other.
Yeah.
And so what I did was figured out then a metric, I call it opportunity, our opportunity. And I just took the yes here divided by the total, which is, so that would be 3 out of 12 is 25%. For third round, 1 out of 12 is 8%. So now, Dennis, we can track what our opinion is by the round. And notice, look at round 10, 11, but 12, 13, and 9. Dennis, our metrics are going to be pointing almost half the time or more.
Wow.
To if our metric, our average, and again, I'm not saying we know that yet, we're just beta testing, but if that is on point, Dennis, then we're going to get 4 or 5 nice value players. This is our value zone right here this year, Dennis. See, Dennis hadn't seen this. So I plot this, and now, Dennis, you can see it by plot. Here we go. About round 9, 10, 11 drops, but say 9, 10, 11, 12. Right in here is us. So, Dennis, here's the thing, and this is, you hadn't thought about like it. That means that the Yahoos, if we're right half the time, that means the Yahoos, by random chance, are going to also 50-50 shot at picking the value that we've found. So that means that they're going to crow about a lot of the players that we pick with our metrics that just by dumb luck, they've landed on it. So that means, Dennis, that the Yahoos, if you look, And over, say, 2 years, 3 years, 4, say 5 years, there's about what, 3-4% of lucky idiots that can say in 5 years they have picked good value, and look how good we are. And they're just by random chance been the lucky idiot. They're the survivors. And remember, they're going to crow, and people going to look, man, that guy's been on point 5 years. I don't know where we'll be in 5. We may be, wearing a barrel out the door and everybody laughing at us, or we may be. So, Dennis, that was what came to me. It's like, that means if we're right, let's just say we're not 100% right, but if we're 100% right, that means folks coming out of the woodwork are going to be right 50% of the time. So 100 yo-hos on Twitter, 50 of them are going to be right in these draft rounds. And they don't even know why they're right. We can point to our metrics and say, this is what led us to this decision. This data analysis. So a hypothesis is that right now, based on this data, my hypothesis, by the end of the year, we're going to find that we found good draft. I don't hate to use the word sleeper because I don't know what that means, but we found good value in these rounds. That's my hypothesis. We'll see at the end of the year, Dennis, and we could click it up. So I'm going to stop here. I've got more to say on this, but I'm going to let Dennis comment about 5 years, the lucky 3 or 4 out of 100 yo-hos would look as good as us, Dennis. Isn't that sad? Isn't that
well,
sad?
no, it's not really sad, because what I look at here is any percentage that's in your favor
Yeah.
means that you actually have a better chance of picking than the Yahoos, because you've got 3 ways of grading this. Okay. And then you got 3 ways of grading the results. The results can be, hey, he was about where you expected him to be for that round. He was better or he was worse. But the fact that we have a 7 in 12 chance in the 10th round
Isn't that
of being,
nice?
of being smarter than the average
And
bear.
look, 6 and 6 rounds, 12 and 13. That's pretty damn good.
That's really solid, because I would think that if it was, again, if the metrics are good,
Again, if.
okay, and
But we're doing a beta test.
we're doing a beta test, but we know that the individual metrics that we have tested,
Your MVP for sure has been tested, been on point with RBs and QBs.
My MVP says it's really good at RBs and QBs. So
and as good as the public on the other 2.
On the other positions, correct. Yep. So 10th, 9th through 12th rounds.
Some good quarterbacks
which is where we're 9th through 13th rounds
Dak,
in this
Love,
case.
There's some nice picks.
Absolutely. So what this says is our metrics are really good at quarterbacks. Our, for instance, my MVP metric is better than the average bear at quarterback. Yep. So I can find the quarterback values more frequently.
Imagine in Superflex how this would play. And that's why I think you're so damn good, is that using your MVP, that has propped you up for your QB 2s and 3s that are really more one-like.
Correct. And that's where, again, draft strategy of saying, you know what? I don't care if I'm going to be hurting at running back or wide receiver. I'll figure something out. I don't want to be hurting at quarterback and tight end. And so I will go early at those positions, knowing that some older running backs and wide receivers will fall to me.
Yep.
That will, so I will pick up some value. I'll stumble into value there. But here in the 9th through 13th round, not only are our metrics more likely to find the hidden gems, but our draft strategy will as well. So imagine this, if you will, Professor. We've spent the first 8 rounds, 7 of the first 8 rounds, because one of the rounds will will devote for tight end early.
Yeah.
So let's say if I take a tight end in the second round, I can get one of the best 3 tight ends in that second round.
4, yeah, the 4 are going in that.
And then the 6 or 7 of the next of the other 8 picks, I get my values at wide receiver and running back that I love. So maybe I've got my 4 wide receivers and I've got 3 running backs by the time I get to round 9. So my first 8 rounds, I got my 4 wide receivers, so I'm set there. I got my 3 running backs. I'm in a good start there, and I've got my elite tight end, so I have an advantage there. So my metrics say I'm going to be a lot smarter picking out a player between the rounds 9 and 13, even if, Professor, in your league that we just showed, if you go ahead and you invest in Prescott and Love in back-to-back rounds,
I've considered that.
not only will you have 2 players that'll beat the metrics, you've got 2 players that both have 6 really good matchup games each. Dak is 6 versus 5, easy versus tough. Love is 6 versus 3, easy versus tough. And I haven't looked, but dumb luck says that the 5 rough games for Dak and the 3 rough games for Love won't all coincide with each other.
You could stream them.
You could stream in a 1
and
quarterback
have you
league.
QB1 a lot of those weeks.
Oh yeah. So you got an advantage built in. Plus you've already built your roster in such a way. Plus you're somewhat immune of injury, because unless you're really unlucky, like I was last year when I had Burrow and Cousins as my quarterback tandem.
Hard to come back from double injuries.
Double injuries, and I still finished second in that league. So even if you're got the worst luck when it comes to Prescott and Love, you're probably not losing both of them in a 1 quarterback league. So that is a strategy that I would look at in your league, because the metrics are saying we're going to be right about those players being better than what the average person thinks about them. So and we know already that my MVP index is better at picking out quarterbacks. So I love that strategy because I think it will fall
Dennis,
in.
A flip way, and I could plot this kind of sad opportunity. If we looked at the no, you see that it's pretty high to round 8. So
Yeah.
it's funny. In other words, you can make mistakes more likely in the first 8 than we can with our metrics in 9 to 13. So if we can survive that, and I think we can, then we get gravy on our turkey in rounds 9 to. I mean, we could really rock and roll. I think this is anatomy of our profitability. That's how I'm seeing it. I'm seeing dollar signs here, Dennis. That's what I see.
And even in our worst weeks, the even is still higher than our worst weeks. On our the evens are higher than our no.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah.
So we never are in a situation at any round where our odds of being wrong outweigh our odds of being right. That's a nice situation.
Round 8 is the dangerous, and round 3. In other words, I can plot where we need to be cautious. But if you look at round 8 and round 3, we need to. So now I'm going to go back in now that and again, I just thought of this, Dennis, because I just did this the other day. So now I got to go look at round 8 and 13. So folks, I use my data as a beginning for more questions and more testing. And that's how it needs to be, folks. This is not the end of what I'm doing. This is just allows me to focus and ask more questions. That's the scientific method.
In science, every experiment results in three answers.
Yeah.
It either confirms your hypothesis,
And
which is
really, Dennis, they technically say that you only falsify the hypothesis.
correct,
That
correct,
in real science, they say we can't reject the hypothesis versus
correct,
we reject it. So
correct.
it's really just two. Like, I
That's
don't know, but I
but
can tell you it's not this.
but what I'm saying is
I understand what you're
the
saying.
results either say, hey, that hypothesis is really looking better than not, or it's inconclusive, or you failed miserably. It's never a 100%
No,
in the scientific method. You'd never get to 100%, just like we'll never get to
no,
100% in fantasy football.
no.
But if you can advance the game, and even when you see data that says, like this does, hey, there's something really good going on in rounds 9, 10, 12, and 13.
And again, this is with our metrics, folks. You can, and again, if you have to pay for some, I'd look at theirs and ask the same questions. I mean, that's the whole point. If nothing else, you'd say, man, this weekly value is crap. Fine, find another metric, but follow our process with your metrics.
So what this tells me is that I'm now interested in seeing the breakdown, Professor,
Mhm.
on where we are right and wrong
On
by
positions.
position.
Are you saying like this?
That's
Are
exactly
are
it.
you saying like
I
this?
knew the professor. I've been working with
Uh,
this professor long enough. I knew the professor would have
and
the
you want
answer to my
some
query.
are you saying you want names for each position?
I don't care so much about the names as I
But I
care
can
about the
even show you
positions, but
things.
the names are
So
great.
look, names, round, yes, even, no, and you can start spotting things and planning long-term strategy. Yes, I have that data, Dennis.
Well, I'm looking forward to breaking that down because I want to know where I'm wrong. I
Yeah,
want to know what
and
position
this
I'm.
is available on Science. I went ahead and showed. So if you've got questions about, again, this is our 5 metrics. I did the average. Again, we don't know if that's the correct way. It may be MVP is 80% the show and calm is 20%. We don't know. Maybe two of the three or two of the 5 are the best. Maybe 4. Maybe we just need to throw one out and average. We don't know. That's why it's called beta testing. But right now, today, this year, beta testing, this is the answer. And I've got the quarterbacks and I've plotted all out, including names, and you can see the running backs. So uh, Swift is even. So Moster of that next pick, Dennis, is our metrics say he's a value for, getting back to that. And Warren is an issue.
And
We
I'd agree with that. I look at the situation with Warren and Harris this year.
Harris is even, Warren is a problem.
What I have done in so far
Yeah.
in the way I've approached it as of August 3rd
Mm-hmm.
this season is the only time I have the only teams other than Dynasty, but the only just drafted them this year teams
Mm-hmm.
for single season that
Mm-hmm.
I have either Warren or Harris
Yeah.
is a best ball team where, because of where I was drafting, I ended up getting one in the seventh, end of the seventh, and the other one in the beginning of the eighth. So I got both Warren and Harris as my RB 3 and 4 on a best ball league. And I felt really good about that. In redraft, I think the better strategy might be to avoid both of them, because in redraft, sometimes it's a decision thing. For instance, this year, I'm feeling really good about taking Jonathan Brooks from Carolina in the 7th round. But if I take him in the 7th round, I'm probably taking Chuba Hubbard later in the draft because I want both of them. I don't just want one of them.
Right. And
First,
Chuba is, where's Chuba at? I don't.
he's going late.
And he's a value in round 12.
12th round, he is a huge value. And you notice Brooks is a value earlier on in that 7th round, or he's even anyway.
Yeah.
So what I'm looking at with Brooks, and the reason I like the targeting him as again, he'd be my RB3 or 4, depending on how well I've done earlier in the draft and where he falls in line in the draft. But if I can get Brooks and I come back with Chuba Hubbard, I have that position locked up, and I feel really good about that. And if I have to go later and I get, into a situation like that, I feel good about one of my running backs each and every week because I'm going to have a starter that I can run out there. Is he going to be a top 10 starter? Probably not. But he'll be good enough to either fit in my flex or my second running back position. And again, that means he scored over 75 on my MVP index. That's where I expect both of them. If I graded the starting running back for Carolina all year long, whoever got the most touches, I think they'll be in that 75 to 80 range on MVP based on what I'm expecting out of that offense. They're going to be a RB24-ish starter. I'll take that as my second or third, especially my third starting running back. I'll be happy with that all day long.
And I moved to tight end just to show you Kittle is our value pick in round 5.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then Hawkinson, Schultz, and Komet pairing up, or later still, if you want 3, Juwan Johnson, Jelani Woods, Hurst, or Ertz, and likely actually, especially if you got Andrews, you bet likely. What that's saying, Dennis, our metrics pick up that if Andrews gets hurt again,
Yes.
likely collects. And that almost, if I'm drafting Andrews, you got to take likely, folks. Don't be paying half your fab when you didn't take him and everybody's going, and third weekend and Andrews tweaks and everybody's, you're going to see it. And he'd be, be on the TV, everybody be talking, your league, even your half drunk league mates, they'll wake up. Yeah, I'll grab him, and then you're going to pay. Don't pay. Go ahead and if you like Andrews, take a likely. Don't be tricked and be like, boy, I wish I would have taken him. Wish somebody would have told me. Dennis and Professor told you. Okay. Not saying, take Andrews, but if that's where you end up, you got to take likely. Come on, folks.
There's very few situations in fantasy football where one pick sets you up for another pick. That's one of them. If you got Andrews, then you start looking where likely is going, and you take him maybe 6 to 10 positions above his ADP if you can get him. If you don't get him, that's fine. Yeah. But that's the strategy. So one thing I've noticed with this metric of looking at things, yes, even or no.
You like that?
What this picks up, Professor, are the players that, according to the consensus, are expected to have a much, much better year this year than they have in the last 2 years combined. That's how our metrics work. Our metrics are looking at sustainability of top performance. So I have Garrett Wilson, I have Jamar Chase, I have Drake London, all doing better than what they did in the last 2 years. But I don't have them guaranteed to do well enough to be a first round pick like Wilson or Chase, or even a second round pick like London, I would look at Garrett Wilson as a valuable player, maybe round 2, early to mid portion of round 2. I would look at Chase as being valuable tail end of the first round, but they're gone by then.
Yeah.
So that's why they're not values versus a Devontae Adams, who, because of poor quarterback play, the consensus is lower on him. Debo, because of this fear of injury, everybody's lower on him than they should be based on his performance. So these are the kinds of
And
metrics.
there's Devonta Smith. If you remember, I took Lamb, Adams,
Huge.
Smith. Look at what so folks, you'll hear a lot of these yahoos. They'll talk a game, but if you ever see their lineups, hold it now. You didn't draft any of your breakouts. And they'll, don't pay attention to what I really said. This is, come on, folks. I'm trying to walk the walk here as best I can. And, that team we just talked about, a bunch of them were what our metrics were pointing to values here. Just like Moster is coming up, and I would consider him a value at that spot in the 7th round as well.
So let's look at the 6th round for wide receivers that you have up here, and I'll show you. I'll walk
Godwin
you through.
And Allen. Allen was gone in my, but Godwin was still there. Yeah.
So I'll walk you through the process here. So when I look at this data, it lets me know which guys are safer picks than the other guys. All 5 of these wide receivers, I think, are appropriately priced in fantasy football going in the 6th round. I wouldn't have a problem with any of these guys, leaving with them in the 6th round. But now the decision, let's say I'm early part of the 6th round and I've got all 5 of these guys that I get to decide from. I'm throwing Hollywood Brown and Terry McLaurin out instantly, because our metrics say that we're less likely to hit on those guys than we are some other guys. And I would look and I'd say Godwin or Allen. That's the pick for me, because the percentages are in our favor to be right on those 2 players. And between Godwin and Allen, I'm taking Godwin. He's younger and he's moving back into the slot, and he's got less competition for targets. He just has to compete with Evans, which is a big it's a big competition, but he doesn't have 2 more really good guys to compete with. Whereas Keenan Allen has to worry about a tight end in Cole Kmet or Everett. He's got to worry about a rookie wide receiver in Romeo Odunze, and he's got to worry about DJ Moore, who they just signed to a huge contract. So the team thinks pretty highly of him. Chris Godwin would be the automatic choice. But that's the reasoning I would use. It's not that, oh, Ridley sucks or Hollywood Brown sucks or Terry McLaurin sucks. I'd be happy with all of those players on my roster at that pick. But if I get to pick between all 5 of them, I'm putting the odds in my favor. Similarly, 3rd round is a great example of my selection process. I love Jalen Waddle. I love DK Metcalf at the cost. I like Nico Collins, but I liked him a lot better when he was cheaper last year. So I like all 3 of those players. I'll take Debo ahead of them 100% of the time, because Debo has the big advantage. Now, between Ayuk, Kupp, Metcalf, Waddle, Evans, Collins, yes, 3 of them are in the even category and 3 of them are in the no category, but I'm not going to let one category keep me away from drafting somebody as much as I'm going to let 2 categories keep me away from drafting somebody. So in other words, if I'm comparing Debo to the field, Debo has an advantage over Metcalf, Waddle, and Collins. He's a little closer to Ayuk, Kupp, and Evans. That's the reasoning and how I would use this yes, even, and no categories and taking it to the first round, there's nobody that has a huge advantage. Nobody has a 2 category advantage. So that becomes a little bit more of a finesse pick, but also 6 out of the 8 guys have an advantage against 2 of the guys, making them the more logical picks. That's how I would use this data, Professor, when it comes to finding the pattern within the data. But look at this 7th round, and you got 3 guys who are gold.
Now,
And
Hopkins got hurt, so this
got
was
hot,
made
got hurt.
before that
Yep.
injury. But I definitely Reed. I mean, Rashid Wright. We're just hoping this doesn't look at the legal system. I'm not a lawyer. I can't, or I'm not an MD with Hopkins. I can only compare our metrics, and that's what it says, Dennis.
Rashi Rice, without any legal issues hanging over him, is pretty close to a mid 4th round value, in my opinion. Even with the other additions with Kansas City, I think the other additions just make him even better of a guy to have. So I'll take a guy like that in the 7th round and take the chance, because taking him in the 7th round, Professor, he's not one of my top 2 wide receivers. I probably am already looking at my 3rd or probably even my 4th wide receiver at that point. Now I don't care if my guy misses 4 games or 6 games due to injury or due to legal issues.
Yep.
I've got an advantage for the weeks that he is playing. Now, if Rashee Rice was 1st round talent, let's say the legal issues were for one of those players. I'm not going to name a name, but if the legal problems were in a guy, one of those 8 wide receivers that's going in the 1st round, I'm running as far away from that player as I can, because I don't want any disadvantages in the first 3 rounds. I want only advantages, which is why I'm also passing on Wilson and Chase in that 1st round if those other 6 guys are available, and one of them will be.
Wilson, I think in a range of outcomes is so variable compared to those other ones. I just don't have the appetite. Roger, we don't know what the hell's going to. I mean, he's liable to go sleeping in the pyramids day 1. Where's he at? He's not there. He's sharpening his razor blades under the pyramid in Egypt. I don't know where the hell he's at. I just don't know, Dennis.
I think they're
I'd be looking elsewhere.
I think their backup quarterback situation is better for
Well, I
Garrett
hope
Wilson
so.
this year. But here's where Garrett Wilson, if I look at all of the variables for Garrett Wilson, I rank him upside. I could see WR3, 3rd best wide receiver in the league. I could honestly see that. But I could also see the 20th best wide receiver in the league. I'm not saying that his value is right in the middle of those.
If I've got,
but I'm
Sun God and him, I mean, yeah, and Lamb and I mean, yeah, Sun God could beat them all this year. He could beat number 1.
His range of logical outcomes, in my opinion, is somewhere between WR1, and even if you say, oh, Garrett Wilson could be WR1, yeah, I guess so. I think it's possible. But if I looked at all the things other than injury that could happen to Amon-Ra St. Brown, I can't make a case for him outside of the top 8. That's why he is such a value to me. And I say the same thing about CeeDee Lamb. I can't see a case where CeeDee Lamb, other than injury or holding out, is worse than the 5th best wide receiver in the league. So those are the kinds of decisions that I make along the way. Jefferson, WR1, WR12. That would be my range for him. I think he's somewhat quarterback proof, but that's still a wide variance compared to
He had a few
to
down
an
weeks
Amon.
last year. He had a few down
Correct.
weeks. He sure
Yes, he
did.
did. Yes, he did. And in his last 4 weeks, which were all back from injury with garbage quarterbacks, he hit the consistency number I look for each and every time. But one of the games was just at that threshold of hitting 10 points. So his MVP index was healthy for those 4 games, but his upside, his best scenario, his best index was not as good as some of the guys down the stretch. So that's why I say WR1, WR12 with him. Puka Nakua, if Cup stays healthy, if Stafford doesn't this year, his range of outcomes, I could see him as WR1. I could see any of these guys going in the first round as hitting the WR1 level easily. But if he doesn't, if things don't work out for Puka, he could also be closer to WR20. That's why I'm not touching him in the first round this year. That's the way you have to strategize in fantasy football. You have to look at the good with the bad. AJ Brown of these guys is probably the least likely to finish WR1 of these guys going. I would say my upside for AJ Brown would be about WR3, but his downside is like WR12 or maybe 14. So the range isn't that great, which is another reason why he's been a late first, early second for me. I had one best ball draft where I was able to get him. I was going late, and I could have taken either him or Amon-Ra St. Brown with the 8th pick, the way that draft went. I took Amon-Ra with the 8th pick, and I came back in the next round with AJ Brown, and I thought I'd stolen on both of those guys, stole value from the rest of the league. But that's how you have to approach the first round, Professor, is you have to minimize your risk. Now, I get late in a draft. Round 10 is a great example. I'm taking Cortland Sutton. I'll take him because he's got the advantage over these other guys. And that's what I look for in each round is give me an advantage. Michael Williams in the 13th is another classic example. He's an automatic pick for me because the later I go in a draft, any advantage I can scratch out, I'm taking all day long.
And so notice that the extreme no's start going away because the pick level is such that they're not overvalued. People are not getting crazy. I think
Yes.
if you think about that, it starts petering out about the 8th round or so. So for the most part with wide receivers. So you either get about right by our metric or advance. But we win, folks, because you're picking the about rights where we're going for the upside. And that's how we win late. So it's like courses, right? First course, appetizer, first course, dessert. This is our dessert in the late rounds where we're picking the Mike Williams, or I like Thielen in the 14th, Davis,
Oh, yeah.
Wandale, Demarcus Robinson. And if you want a free pick, Boyd, Bourne, Shark, or Nice, just okay. I don't know who else to grab. What should I do? Again, drop them after 2 or 3 weeks, right? It doesn't matter, but it's free. I mean, you're talking free squares at that point, but they have something there. Our metrics are saying there's something there, folks. Don't forget about them.
And Wandale Robinson is a classic example. He is not going to be better than Malik Neighbors this year. He's not going
No,
to outscore Malik Neighbors. He's not going to outscore him in weekly value or any metric that you want to use.
but in round 16,
But in round 16, he's got upside because teams will get burned by Neighbors. Now I'm assuming that Jones stays healthy, and I'm assuming Jones plays back to 2 years ago, which is the only reason that you're reaching at a guy. But you're talking 16th round
I mean, we're
for crying
talking
out loud.
round 4, Neighbors,
Yeah,
and then if Neighbors got hurt though, Wandale Robinson gets even more interesting.
or if teams try to take Neighbors out of the
Then
game
Robinson can pick up
defensively, yeah,
some trash points and you win.
and
You know,
round 16, if I get a
he's a
guy,
bye week friend. He's going to be your bye
yes,
week friend.
yes, and that's how I attack this. One guy that I love in round 16, though, that people are avoiding because I'm only looking at upside in
Yeah.
round 16.
Our
Okay.
metrics say everybody's everybody. You know, nothing's dramatic one way or the other except for Wandale.
But let's say, what if Cortland Sutton gets traded or
Yeah,
gets
then
hurt?
Mims gets interesting.
Mims is a guy, or Troy Franklin around later is the guy. So I might take a shot at either one of those guys.
Yeah,
It
Franklin 17. Yeah.
Michael Wilson doesn't excite me, but how about Quentin Johnson? That Chargers team is going to have a top wide receiver. It might not be great, but they're going to have a top wide receiver. It's
And Dennis, you know, our metrics might find that one of those 5 might be better later for us. Wouldn't that be a treat to
yes,
find that we actually need kind of an early average and we have this combination, and maybe then we switch to our metrics to a different formulation for late? I would love that. That would be amazing.
yeah, and none of these guys have a negative by their
No,
name, so they're
no.
they're all good values. Versus, look at round 10. Would you take a Jameson Williams over a Cortland Sutton?
No.
No. The metrics tell you probably not a good idea.
Doesn't
Now,
mean that Williams can't score better on weeks than Sutton, but we're saying I think the range of outcomes is pretty broad there.
yeah, versus round 11 where nobody's got a disadvantage. I like Palmer there
I
because I
like
think
Cooks.
you like Cooks. I love Palmer there. But again, you're talking round 11. You're looking at different things. Cooks has a little less range of outcomes, but then again, late in the season, Lamb misses a game.
Or
Cooks could have a
they set him up, you know, maybe he's tweaking. Let's let him sit a game or two.
and Palmer could emerge as the top target guy on his team at wide receiver. Same can be said about Shakir in the 11th. Those guys could both lead their RB rooms in targets, and you're getting them in the 11th round.
Look at the
And I'm
12th round. You almost can't make a mistake there.
12th round, you're looking
What
good. Now, Judy got hurt. He had a knee injury here
again?
this
I
week.
haven't. This is non-injury. You know, this
Yep.
is just
This is
our
just what's
metrics.
what's
Yeah,
been happening,
use
but
common sense.
I'll update it when we know the data. And I don't like Wicks in that round because he's got too much competition for touches in
Well,
that
I
wide
don't
receiver
like
room.
Wicks because I've got 4 other better choices. Why would I
Perfect.
default to the even when I can take some advantage there?
And I know everybody's down on Jerry Judy after the last couple years. Okay, I know it.
But it's 12th round.
He's turned into a bit of a joke when it comes to fantasy football because he has been one of the underperforming all-stars over the last 2 seasons. But one of the terms that I'm so glad that you have coined
Yeah.
recently
Yeah.
is one we steal from horse racing. It's the idea of back class. And
Yeah.
believe it or not, folks, the back class on Jerry Judy, he had one season, 2022. His MVP index was a 92.
That's spectacular.
That's top 15
Yep.
material easily, top 12 some years. That's his back class. You're getting that in the 12th round.
You got a taste of that in the 12th round.
Here,
There's the value.
here's the my biggest pet peeve about fantasy football is when somebody takes a guy like that in the 12th round, or you're faced with that decision. You take Jerry Jeudy, and they say, "Oh, I took the WR 45 and he finished WR 42.
I'm a
I'm
winner.
I'm a winner."
I'm a winner.
I, I
Chicken
look
dinner.
at it. I
Yeah.
look at it at 45 and I say, if that guy finishes in the top 30 at his position, I've got to win. Anything else is a push. I don't care if he's WR 85 when I got him at 45. All I care about is top 30 potential. And Jerry Jeudy has the back class. It's only 1 year. That's why he's not a value until you get late in a draft like the 12th round. Rashid Shaheed is an interesting case because that's a player that we just don't know how good he can be because he's never been a consistent guy getting 60% or more of the snaps. So we don't know what we don't know when it
And
comes to
he's
Rashid
got
Shaheed.
A.T. Perry. I'm a Saints guy that could stifle him as well, but you get him in the 12th. And
And
A.T.
in,
Perry's free, by the way, folks.
and in my rankings, I have both Shaheed and A.T. Perry rated as an MVP index of 55.
Which is not bad.
Last year, it's not horrible. Like if if
But
I've got it,
Perry, Dennis, is more value than
oh yeah,
Shaheed.
I will not draft a player, an established player, a veteran who's been there 3 years or more, and Shaheed hasn't been 3 years or more. He's starting his third season. But let's say I've got a player with 3 or more years of experience and he's got an MVP of less than 50, I'm not touching that guy. But if I've got a young player with an MVP of over 50, I know that if I'm wrong, I'm probably going to be wrong because his MVP is going to end up a heck of a lot higher. He finished Shaheed last year in limp. He was 29 on MVP index, but the year before in a partial season as a rookie, he was a 50. A.T. Perry last year was a 50. So I look at those guys and I say the upside is there. If a guy has consistently shown me that he's lousy, he's not likely to jump 2 tiers into fantastic. He might jump up from lousy to average, but I always look at the back class and I always look at the round. You're looking at players in a different way in round 12 than you are in round 2. Round 2, I care about safety. I want advantages because there are other good players in that category. Round 12, I'm fine with Jacoby Myers. His worst case is he's the second best wide receiver on his team. I'm okay with Jerry Jeudy. The worst case for him, or the worst case for him, is that he's the third best wide receiver on his team. I'm okay with Rashid Shaheed. His worst case is that he's third best on his team. Romeo Dubs and Wicks could both be the WR4 or WR5 on their own team. So I will take the other 3 guys ahead of them 100% of the time. You got to look at opportunity. Opportunity leads to upside. And that's what we want in fantasy football is upside.
That's true. I hope these metrics help folks at least frame questions for them to do research, right? And that's what I do. And again, these are all available, folks. Science of Fantasy Football. We working hard for you every day, and we're doing beta test, and we will be better than we are this year, next year. So you need to hang around and follow us along, because we're going to get better. Hopefully we were going to get better.
And here, Professor, is a way that the beta testing works. So last year, I have always looked at the really good games, the above median games, and the lousy games for players. I've been charting those numbers for 6 years and using that data to help me pick players in drafts. But it wasn't until last year that I put it together as a number, as an index, the MVP index. What I found by going back through the successful teams that I had in best ball versus the successful teams that I had in redraft, I did some beta testing, and I showed it showed that the piece of the puzzle that goes into MVP of the lousy games was not important in best ball because I didn't have to set a lineup. So all I cared about were the good games. When I looked at and broke down the data in my redraft leagues, I couldn't see an advantage over the 3 parts. I didn't have to worry about weighting the 3 different parts that go into MVP because the data said they're all fairly even. And that if I've got a player with a high upside, lots of spike games, but he also has lots of negative games, that makes him less valuable than players that don't have that high percentage of low games. So the MVP index got graded out of being even. But in best for redraft and for dynasty, any league where you have to set a lineup. But in best ball leagues, it was not as valuable to have that component in. And that's how the best index was born, of just looking at the upside. So the beta testing often leads to better tools for different formats. And right at this point, August 3rd, 2024, looking at our 5 metrics that we have plus Vegas, so that's 6 metrics.
Yeah, that's just what we need is more to keep up with, Dennis.
But looking at 6 different metrics and grading them even in year 1, we will get an idea from success and failure on which of these indexes might be redundant and that we can get rid of, which would be great. Which would be great. Less work is never a problem with me.
Nope.
But we'll also maybe find out that at certain positions
or certain times in the draft, I'm hoping that's going to work.
Places in the draft, different metrics will be better at identifying the gems that could come along. Or we might find out that a 7th metric, my MVP forecast, which attempts to take changes in opportunity. If I'm right about the changes of opportunity and the MVP index goes up by the percentage that I expect, maybe that tool becomes weighted heavier than just looking at what has happened over the last year or 2 years combined in our metrics. We will know that. We will be smarter next year at this time.
Yep.
Based on the scientific method. The scientific method will make a bad player into an average or good player really quick. And then the scientific method will make the best players even better as the dynamics, as the indexes, as the values are better understood of how we need to weight them going forward. So head on over to the Science of Fantasy Football. The professor has a ton of data. Nobody has broken down ADP quite like the professor. And if you play at FPPC, he's giving you a lot of free advantages. Just be kind to him if you see his teams or my teams show up.
I'm gonna hide. You're not gonna know who I am. You're not gonna find the sucker at the table.
But nobody's doing ADP analysis better than the professor right now. And all that data for you over at the scienceoffantasyfootball.com. My better than zero
The editor's
philosophy.
working on that, at least mentally right now. He's thinking about all those grammar mistakes, and he's going to make that happen today.
It'll be over 80 to 100, that I guaranteed. But the data is there, the analysis is there, the process is there for everybody to see. I'm giving away my process because I think I can do my process better than the average bear. And then, of course, head on back here in 2 weeks.
We'll be at the expo next week, folks. Come find us
next week. Come find us, and we'll do the podcast for you in person for you. We'll discuss things for an hour and a half with you in person. But come on back here next week for another edition of the Science.
2 weeks. 2 weeks.
The Science of Fantasy Football.
Get to work, folks.